Imagine a world where rockets never learn to fall back to Earth, like arrows that wish to be saved. A world where the ocean kept the secrets of broken stages and drowned telemetry, and the sky, unpierced by returning fire, stayed a little quieter than it was meant to be. In this world, cell towers carried what satellites could not, cables crawled along the floors of oceans, and deserts had no constellations of metal keeping vigil above them. In this world, the night sky waited for a promise that was never kept, and the silence became its own kind of gravity. He is pacing a rented office in El Segundo that smells faintly of solvent and late pizza, eyes a color somewhere between exhaustion and fever. There is a printout with hand-drawn circles on its stage separation timing, engine chill routine, an arrow scrawled toward a box that simply says, luck. He would never have admitted to that last box, not to an investor, not to the team, not even to himself. But it lived on the paper just the same. And now the paper is a map of someplace he isn't going. Before we step through the door that shouldn't open, remember how the real corridor ran. There was the boy in South Africa who took things apart to find the hum of logic inside them. There was the young man in Canada and then Pennsylvania, sleeping where code outlasted the night, selling a company that taught cities to read their streets. There was PayPal and a check with too many zeros, and the insistence, like a cough he couldn't ignore, that money was only fuel and fuel was only flame, and flame was only a promise to the sky. In 2002, he founded a rocket company that most people, privately, thought was the sort of dare you make to the cosmos before you learn it doesn't bet small. Falcon 1 lifted and fell 2006, 2007, 2008, each failure threading the needle of catastrophe and learning. In our world, the fourth flight succeeded. NASA knocked with cargo contracts. Reusability became a mantra no longer mocked. In our world, rockets landed, smoke blooming like soft applause on drone ships with ironical names. But the corridor can turn. The door can open differently. Imagine the second failure, the seizing hush after the feed goes gray, the team holding still as if motion itself might break the fragile math of denial. Imagine him leaving the control room, the heat of the screen still on his skin, the taste of electrolytes and coffee turned metallic in his mouth. He calls the investors. He answers no questions, because questions would allow a future tense, and he has none to give. He writes an email at 3:14 a.m., a perfect and bloodless thing that speaks in passive voice and technical cause, a role coupling we did not predict, a timing anomaly we could not correct. He ends it with gratitude for courage and states the intention to wind down operations in an orderly fashion. He does not use the word surrender. He does not need to. The next morning, he doubles back to the floor. The engine guys are there early, eyes swollen with the kind of hope that is just habit. He tells them himself. He says it's about capital and survival, about choosing the fires he can keep. There are nods, half smiles, that look of trying to be brave for the person who is supposed to be the bravest. A single copy that clicks out from the back like a seatbelt being unfastened. The word copy hangs in the rafters like a paper plane. SpaceX is sold for parts. Some of the tooling goes to a legacy contractor that will strip it for what can be used and shelve the rest. The Merlin prototypes are crated and wheeled into storage like animals who do not know why the light has gone. The name doesn't have time to become a myth. It simply passes into that quiet administrative antechamber where young companies go to unexist. In the weeks that follow, the maps of launch windows gather a little more dust. A pad in the atoll keeps its concrete clean. He moves the remaining caches, not the companies, toward an electric car outfit across the bay that is impossibly beautiful and impossibly fragile. He speeds the meeting with Daimler by 6 months. He agrees to terms he would have fought in the other timeline. He stares at a spreadsheet where burn rate and runway sit like cliffs and tides, and he decides to bring the ocean closer. He steps onto the board, steps into the spotlight, steps into a kind of adulthood he always said he despised, collaboration by compromise. And then because men like him do not stop creating gravity just because they have stopped chasing stars, he pivots into the earth. Power is a network, he says into microphones. Storage is destiny. The future's bandwidth runs on batteries, not booster stages. He rolls out a plan for modular grid storage that makes utility executives blink, then nod, then sign. The project gets a clean name, Atlas Grid, because no myth has ever born a world without first learning to lift. In this other life, he doesn't hold a rocket in his palm. He holds a city and squeezes until it lights. Atlas Grid swallows subsidiaries and spits out glossy renderings that are too real to be fantasy and too bold to be dull. His public persona sharpens into something less messianic and more municipal. The suits are darker. The laughter is quieter. He becomes the man mayors call when storms are named. He does TED, of course, but the joke about Mars is a throwaway line. A ghost light he flicks on and off to see who still looks up. He says a cleaner Earth removes the need for any other. The internet posts 1,000 claps. Children draw solar shingles in crayon. It works. That might be the strangest part. Battery density inches forward. Procurement grows elegant. Factories hum with that precise, almost religious efficiency that makes engineers tear up. Atlas earns, and then it gushes. He buys a tunnel-boring machine on a dare, and then buys 3 more on purpose. Because congestion is a disease, and cities are the body. The first test tunnel is a stunt. The second is a pilot. The third is a line signed off by a city council, a little too eager to be first to the future. His critics say he's just putting cars underground. His fans say he's building arteries for a tired planet. Both are correct enough to be useful. There is a version of success that tastes like metal. He becomes that success. He stops sleeping well, not because of debt-profit quiets that old line, but because the dreams are different. He dreams of a stage that does not splash down, but comes home, engines feathering, grid fins sighing, as if they too are relieved to have survived their own courage. He wakes to the gleam of a phone lit with municipal emergencies. He texts solutions. He sells power to neighborhoods that can't afford to wait. He hangs another map on the wall. It has no stars. The public loves him when the grid doesn't fail in August. They hate him when it does. He shrugs in front of a committee with a version of humility that is better than nothing, but less than true. He learns to say we where he used to say I, and means it half of the time. He laughs on television and does not show his teeth. He buys a watch that costs as much as a used helicopter. He doesn't know why. In late winter, he drives alone to a stretch of desert where a different company is about to loft another expensive thing into a poor trajectory. He parks far from the press vans. He wears a baseball cap. The countdown reaches the number that always made him feel 13 inside. The rocket goes up, and then part of it fails the way metal fails when mathematics is imprecise, or the shop floor lied, or the wind had a private thought. The stage tears itself into a kind of comet and becomes part of every horizon for a few seconds. He flinches the way people flinch when glass breaks in a silent room. No one recognizes him. He goes home thinking of emails written at 3:14 a.m., sentences so clean they cut. He tells himself the thing any grown man tells himself. When the road behind forks into a forest, he didn't choose. That was the right call. There is a future because of that call. He meets an old engineer from the El Segundo days at an airport bar that is humid with recycled breath. They talk about battery management systems and contractor delays and the price of cobalt. The man's hands do a fluttering thing mid-air, muscle memory of drawing a trajectory on nothing. We were so close, the engineer says, meaning something other than altitude or burn time. He nods. He doesn't say don't use we. He doesn't say it because he needs it too. Tesla changes in this timeline. It grows earlier, but differently. Without a rocket show to calibrate the legend, it becomes less comet and more cathedral slower, heavier, with committees that turn good decisions into better memos. The Model S arrives later than the rumor would prefer, and the supercharger network is a negotiation with utilities that feel like dukes. Europe loves the design and worries about the plugs. China learns fast and builds faster. In this world, the competition comes not from the lazy, but from the hungry. Two mid-sized manufacturers discover that dignity tastes like electrons, and so they make better cars than anybody predicted. He smiles politely in their direction and hates them for being right. His mother visits a factory and says it smells like the color gray. He kisses her cheek and doesn't argue. He takes calls in hallways where the echo makes him sound more certain than he is. He has become the grown-up he used to accuse of slowing down the future, and he hates himself in the way only men who keep promises to others while breaking the crucial one to themselves can. The tunnels begin to open like veins under a handful of cities. The first rides are events. The second month is normal. By the sixth month, a commuter in a blue jacket falls asleep from the safety of it. A journalist calls them subways for people who don't want subways, and the line sticks like gum on the heel of his shoe. He wins zoning battles by turning them into stories about children being picked up from daycare on time. He loses a lawsuit about noise, and wins the appeal with a study that makes a small sound like victory. His calendar fills with mayors and philanthropists in meetings that begin with just 15 minutes. He nods and lives according to the religion of 15 minutes. An intern prints out a photo of a drone ship with a whimsical name. Someone has photoshopped a rocket landing on it with the grace of a stork. The caption reads, "One day." He pins it to a corkboard behind a door no one opens. He never mentions it. He does not unpin it either. There are very few secrets in this life. That picture is one. When he speaks in public about the future, the prepared kind of speaking, with slides and applause cued to the second, he kneads the air with his hands the way he used to when inventing forgiveness for failure. Only now, the forgiveness is reserved for regulators who could not say yes because their careers required no. He seems calm. He is not. This is the part of the movie where the strings are so quiet you only realize they are there when they cut out. On a weekday with blue so perfect it looks composited, he stands on a roof and watches a city drink, sunlight from panels that bear his name and a partner's. It is a good thing. It is a good day. He is surrounded by good people. He does not feel joy so much as relief, that cousin of joy that is welcome but smaller. Down below, cars move through the tunnels he dug. Up above, nothing lands on a boat in the ocean. His phone buzzes with a notification he once would have considered holy, a test flight by a different company. He does not watch. He closes his eyes and listens to wind playing with an antenna. He tells himself that saving the world close to the ground is still saving the world. He wonders when he started saying the word still. He doesn't look like a man who will fall. He looks like a man who has finally learned how to stay. The grid projects throw off money and praise, and lawsuits in that particular ratio that means you are truly part of a city. The tunnels are safer than predicted, until one isn't. It is small. At first a lingering chemical smell. A contractor pencils into a log at the end of a 12-hour shift. A fan array that should have kicked harder. A sensor that shows a median value over a spike because the algorithm trusted averages more than physics. Nothing burns. Nothing dramatic blooms. But a single passenger coughs and posts a video, and the video becomes a question, and the question finds the ear of a council member who has been waiting for a reason to demand a better story. The investigation is slow and public. He sits under lights that flatter no one and feels the old, beautiful terror, the examination of your choices by people who never had to make them. It is not a catastrophe. It is worse. It is a preventable incident. the kind that contains just enough negligence to stain and just enough ambiguity to prevent a clean confession. He says the right things. He means most of them. Slow down, says a man in a suit. He does, which is another kind of speed. Meanwhile, orbit remains expensive. Without a company that treated cost to space like a personal insult, the launch market grew in the shape of the incumbents. Europe builds beautifully and charges accordingly. A domestic alliance keeps its cadence and its margins. China becomes prolific and precise in a way that makes diplomats sweat. Startups flare and vanish, each a lesson someone else has already paid for. Satellite internet arrives like a patient with a limp, sufficient in patches, ungainly at scale, never fast enough to be a lifeline, and never cheap enough to be a right. Children in villages memorize the hours when the sky allows their homework to be downloaded. Teachers learn to print again. There is a winter where the auroras go a little too far south, and for a night the grid hums in a key no one recognizes. Transformers pop like knuckles. Atlas Grid contains the worst of it. He is on television at 3 a.m., tireless, explaining why a world that works is a miracle every hour. People thank him. People blame him. Both are true. He goes home and stands in a dark kitchen and drinks water from the tap because he has built enough of the world to trust it. Tesla does not die. It is a boat that has learned the wind, but it is not the car that changed the world by daring it to accelerate. It is the car that reminded the world it could glide. The charging network expands like ivy, not like wildfire. An old luxury brand leapfrogs with a solid-state battery and a marketing campaign that harvests the romance he used to own. Electric, they whisper, as if the word were new. He claps politely at an auto show and says competition is good. He goes back to a hotel room where the curtains are motorized and the silence this time feels like a ceiling. He visits a hangar in Hawthorne where, in this timeline, there is nothing to visit. An acquaintance with a short memory tells him about an auction where they bought a crate of abandoned engine bells for art. He stands in front of one of those bells now, someone's sculptural centerpiece for a company party, filled with ice and expensive beer. He wants to put his head inside and whisper an apology to the hollow. He wants to ask whether it is worse to fail while trying or to succeed while forsaking. He does not ask. The music is too loud. He tries one spring to correct the shape of the world he has made by seeding a new team. Quietly, no headlines. A skunk works to work the old dream on the sly. He tells himself it is a hedge. He knows it is a confession. He brings in 2 engineers whose hands remember the choreography of turbopumps. They make a small fire, and then a bigger one. They draw parabolas on whiteboards with the guilty joy of sinners who have found their church unlocked at midnight. They go to a pad in the desert and pour noise into the air. Then the money blinks. A partner calls and says the tunnels need him. A regulator calls and says the grid needs him. The skunkworks waits and then wilts the way a secret garden wilts when the gate is beautiful but closed. He signs a check that feels like a tombstone and uses the words, temporarily suspend. He goes for a walk in a museum where a Saturn V lies on its side like a story that has to be read in order. He stands under the engines and thinks about the distance between a nation's will and a man's. He had always believed that distance could be crossed by velocity. Now he is older and suspects the crossing requires something like devotion, the kind that makes you a stranger in your own house. He wonders whether he chose wisely when he chose to remain a husband to Earth. The lawsuits turn mean, as they do when the initial scandal passes and the territories are mapped. A class action claims that particulate from tunnel exhaust caused an illness. That statistics declare impossible and fear declares inevitable. A shareholder suit accuses him of optimism that the law reclassifies as fraud. He loses one, wins one, settles two, and in the end learns that money can write endings but cannot edit them. He goes home and sits on the floor, because there are nights when chairs feel like too much ceremony for loss. A student group sends him a video. They have built a small rocket from scrap and scholarship, and it wobbles upward in a shy parabola before kissing the dirt with a grace that is somehow heartbreaking. They are laughing, radiant with the kind of failure that is indistinguishable from childhood. "We're trying again," the message reads. He forwards it to no one. He watches it 3 times. He puts his phone face down and stares at a wall that used to be silence and is now a choir. The world adapts to the shape of his choices like a river at a bend. Reusability arrives, but not as a revolution, more a negotiated treaty between accountants and engineers. An aerospace consortium unveils a partially reusable system that returns some pieces to a downrange runway with the cautious pride of a parent teaching a child to bike near traffic. It is not cheap. It is not often. It is not a verb children turn into a toy and shout on playgrounds. The idea of Mars goes back to its glass case, something you point at in wonder and then walk past because lunch is in 15 minutes. There are satellites that never fly, and they are not tragedies. Just absence is a slightly less precise weather warning. A seed that never learns a new climate. A fisherman who checks the sky because his phone will not load. He is older when a mayor hands him a key that looks like every other ceremonial key. The speech notes say visionary 4 times. He says thank you 3. He has a joke ready about unlocking jams and unlocking cities. It lands. He smiles. He feels both seen and erased, the way great functionaries feel when the machine is running exactly as designed. After the ceremony, he rides alone in a car that is quiet in the way of whispering libraries and climate-controlled galleries. He looks up through a pane of glass at a sky where nothing falls back home. The secret everyone suspects, but few say aloud, is that the fall was not a balance sheet event. He did not lose everything. He lost the right enemy. Risk had been his antagonist, and without it, he fought paper and fog and the 1,000 paper cuts of humility. He had optimized the world until it purred, and in doing so, had reduced the need for the very courage that once defined him. You can drown in safety too, given time. One night, a storm rolls over a coast that used to be wild and is now catalogued. The grid holds mostly because of him. Patients live through the night because beds do not go dark. A baby breathes into morning because there is charge where there would have been none. He stands by a window and lets the thunder make a case for the world exactly as it is. It is enough, whispers a voice that loves him the way the present loves its own weight. It is not, whispers the voice that taught him how to be unbearable to the impossible. He breathes, a man divided by 2 truths that are both right. He writes a letter he will not send. It is to the 3:14 a.m. version of himself who wrote a different letter years ago. I saved a lot of small worlds, he writes. I did not build the path to the big one. He looks at the sentence until the words lose meaning, then find it again. He folds the page and puts it in a book of rocket equations that he keeps where a different man might keep a Bible. He sleeps. Elsewhere, a child in a mountain town draws a rocket on a math notebook without knowing exactly why. The teacher says, beautiful, and the child nods, as if praise were a kind of weather. The drawing will become a folded airplane, and then the memory of a drawing. Somewhere else, a graduate student figures out a new way to flare methane that makes a small difference and tells no one because small differences do not trend. Somewhere else, a young engineer refuses to go home until the metal stops failing, and she becomes for a decade the person who cannot be moved. The world, deprived of a particular legend, makes its own in tiny, untelevised increments. If you were to stand outside it all and tilt the timeline the way a jeweler tilts a stone, you would see that the consequences of his choice are neither apocalypse nor salvation. They are a change in the slope of a curve, a delay in the arrival of a century that still comes, haggard and late. Climate models run a little hotter for a little longer. Telemedicine takes the scenic route. An astronaut waits 5 more years to feel the old punch of acceleration. The sky, which could have been crowded with miracles, remains respectable. He holds a small ceremony alone in a storage unit one spring. He uncrates an engine bell he found on an auction site and polishes it with the reverence of a person cleaning a headstone. The metal is pocked and proud. He says out loud to no one, "You would have loved it." He means the future. He means himself. He means the version of the world that had 1,000 fewer excuses. At some point, a younger colleague asks him, "Do you ever regret it?" The colleague doesn't specify what it is, because in a life like his, the noun floats. He answers with a smile carved to the micron. "Regret is a poor teacher," he says. It sounds wise. It also sounds like something a man says when the class ended years ago. What is the lesson, then, if not regret? Maybe that the price of quitting is not always collapse. Sometimes the price is competence. Sometimes the fall is a slow, respectful descent into a life that looks, from the outside, like a summit built to code. And maybe the world's loss is less like a door slamming and more like a window, never cut air, you do not notice missing. Light you do not know you wanted. He will die praised for the good he did. The sky will keep a silence whose echo no one remembers it had. And somewhere, on a boat with a ridiculous name, a painted rectangle of deck waits in a universe where gravity was talked into changing its mind. We learn at last that ascension is sometimes moral category. You rise when your life pulls other lives upward. You fall when you stop pulling, even gracefully. The world still turns. The oceans still pull back from the shore. Rockets still arc and crack and improve and arc again, but later, and by hands that were not trembling at 3:14 a.m. He walks through a city that hums because of him and looks up at a sky that does not. The lesson sits down beside him on a bench and does not speak, because some truths do not require language. He breathes them in, the way we breathe air we did not invent, and the night is a mirror that, this time, returns no fire. If you imagine that first door differently, even now you can hear what this world never learned to sound like. It is not the roar of engines. It is the applause of the impossible admitting it was wrong. And you can know, in the marrow that keeps records, that saving the earth and reaching toward another were never competitors. They were the same verb, conjugated at different altitudes. In one life, he used both tenses. In this one, he chose the present. The future forgave him and moved on more slowly. The stars, polite as ever, waited without complaint.